Hello and welcome to PMCLounge.com. My name is Shoaib. I'm the voice behind all the videos that you see on this website as well as our official YouTube channel, youtube.com/PMCLounge. If you're watching this video on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to us. We are all about PMP and project management related certifications. Now, in this video, let's talk about task boards. These are also known as Kanban board or Scrum board. Different teams may call this board with different names, and some people might actually come up and tell you the difference between a Kanban board and a Scrum board, but we are not going there. That's not our topic for today. We are just talking about what task boards really are and how these task boards basically help maintain transparency, how these task boards help you show you the latest status of where you are. So let me share my screen. Actually, transparency is very important, right? Because that's how you will be able to make decisions at the last responsible moment. And that's why I have this video open here. I'll share a link to this video in the description below. We talked about what does making decisions at the last responsible moment mean in Scrum. And you have to have transparency and you have to have trust to be able to do so. So I'll share a link in the description below about directly to this video. But let's talk about the task board, right? And a lot of teams use all kinds of software. Your team might be using something else. I'm just taking an example and using Trello here. So you basically have 3 columns: to do, in progress, done. Whatever that is in to do, let's say developer A is working on user story 1, he can move the user story 1 to in progress. Developer 2 is working on user story 2, right? Developer B is working on user story 2. She can move that in progress. And let's say if one of the stories are complete 3 days later, developer C, who was working on this user story, can move it to done. Now, transparency is maintained because every Scrum team member has the same view and same access to such task boards. So nobody can come in and say, how come user story 3 is already done? When was it done? Because all that is transparently captured on the task board. And of course, you will always have ways to enter more details about user story if you want. So this is basically a simple task board, and it shows how Scrum teams basically manage their work. Now, this task board, it just has user stories, and a lot of agile teams basically just have user stories. They may have another column for backlog. Different teams have different way of working, right? But many teams add cards or stickies also, right? Sticky notes to their board for the task that the stories are decomposed into. These can also be grouped under each story card, right? The sticky notes basically. When the first task moves into, let's say, in progress column, the story goes with it. So it stays there until the last task is done. So we've talked about user stories here. It is possible that when you click on this user story, right, you have a lot of tasks under this user story. So that's why when I said that when a task moves, the user story also move, and the user story remains in progress there until the last task is done. So your teams may have different tasks under each user stories as well. Totally depends on your team. Now, when the sprint begins, all the user stories, they are basically in the to do column. So when the sprint begins, what you'll basically see is all the user stories in the to do column itself, because nobody is precisely working on it. And of course, all your details about the user stories should also be included in these in the details, right? Here you can talk about story points, you can talk about all the 3 sentences that are basically added as part of every user story to define every user story. Now, in mid sprint, right, somewhere in between, in the middle of the sprint, what you will see is some of the user stories are in progress, because whoever is working on certain user stories, they will move them to in progress. Some might even be done. So since the team knows which stories are being worked on, they know what they can take on take on next, right? What user story they can take on next. Since user story 2 is done, and let's say developer A was working on this, and now that it is done, developer A is free, the team can ask developer A to take up another user story, or the developer A can, do it himself or herself. Now everyone can pick what they should work on next instead of waiting for someone to assign it to them, which is why Scrum works, right? Which is why the whole concept of transparency is so important, because once developer A was done with user story 2, it's his or her choice to take up any other user stories. Of course, the other team members should also agree on it, and that's how developer A can take up another user story, right? Now what happens is, towards the end, ideally all the user stories should be in the done column, right? That's the ideal way of finishing off a sprint, that all the user stories are done and you're good to go. But let's say when the team finishes all user stories, what is going to happen next is, in the next sprint you will take a look at the backlog, and like I said, some teams may have a backlog column here as well, and that backlog can, of course, some of the sprints can move to in the to do column from that backlog in the next sprint. But it is also possible that some of the stories are left in to do itself. The sprint is over, but some of the stories the team was not able to complete. So if there are any stories left in the to do, or in the, let's say, even in the in progress column, right? Let's say one of the stories was in progress, but we were done with the sprint, we were towards the end of the sprint time box. What happens is, at the end of the sprint, all these stories, they go back to the backlog, and they are then evaluated in the next sprint. So all of these, they won't remain in progress or to do, they will go back to another column, the backlog column. Or if you're not basically having a different column for backlog, whatever that you're tracking your backlog on, these stories which are not complete will go back to the backlog, and the team will again plan around them, they will again discuss them, and then they will take them up in the next sprint. So that's how a software is basically used as task boards. Of course, if you work in an organization that likes to use sticky notes to manage all this, go ahead, do that. Software is just much more convenient, and in the times like these where everyone's working remotely, and naturally most of the teams out there, even if they have everyone in the same location, sometimes some people are working from home, and they need to have access to what's the status of the sprint, and that's where softwares like Trello or like any other software can come in handy. So I just wanted to kind of share what a task board looks like, and how Scrum teams actually make use of task boards to deliver projects in a real life. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hit the bell icon to stay notified every time we upload new content. Do hit the like button, it helps us stay motivated. If you enjoyed this video, if you got value out of it, smash that like button and let us know. I'll catch you guys in the next video. See you.